It's my privilege and honor to introduce our speaker tonight. I have known him for a number of years. I've never heard his story. However, he's from the GSO staff, and from what I hear, he is a longtime member and spiritual advisor to the Oxford Group in Manhattan. I give you Doug R.
Hello, everybody. My name is Doug. I'm an alcoholic, a spiritual giant. In my own mind, I want to thank John for inviting me to speak and congratulate him and the committee that put this NERAASA on. It's been a fantastic experience and weekend, and I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. There are so many people in this room that I know we could have a conference reenactment here. Oh, my goodness. It's really wonderful. It's such a warm feeling. I've just enjoyed the weekend tremendously. I am not a circuit speaker. Hopefully I'll carry the message and not the mess. But it's a privilege to be here. I've never been to NERAASA, and last year I went to PRASA, which is the ASA on the West Coast, and they had their PRASA at an LAX hotel, LAX airport hotel. This year they're having it in Hawaii. Oh well. When I first came in, I went to the Bill W. dinner, and there was a fellow there speaking, Bill R. from Staten Island, and he said, "I'm Bill R. I'm an alcoholic." He says, "I don't know what to tell you. How many ways can I tell you that I fell under the Christmas tree?" And that's kind of how I feel sometimes, you know. I was an alcoholic, and it was just, my life was a progressive downhill journey when I was drinking and before I was drinking. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time in 1978, in the fall of 1978. I had oh my goodness, I started drinking at 16. And slowly, my drinking just took over my entire life. Everything in my life revolved around drinking. And I came into AA, and I was in a very dark place. I was married. I had 2 little babies. I lived in Manhattan. I worked in a restaurant, a French bistro, that was across the street from where I lived. And it took me about 8 to 10 hours to get home every night that I worked. And one morning I woke up and I just wanted to pull a bullet through my head. I don't know if I would have had the courage, or if you want to call it courage, or the insanity to put a bullet in my head. But I just wanted to die. I was so depressed. I was so miserably unhappy with my life. There was a cosmic conspiracy against me. God had long turned his back upon me. The world was against me. I was the bad luck kid. If something bad was going to happen, it was going to happen to me. My children, they were babies. My daughter was, at this time, she was 5, and my son was 3. They were terrified of me. I had become a raging alcoholic. I hadn't been that way when my daughter was born. She was the joy of my life. But one day I woke up, and I could feel the change in me. Something had snapped. Something had become different in me. And I became this rageaholic with my children. And my wife treated me like another sibling in the house. I was another chore for her to take care of. She took care of the 2 little children, and she took care of the big baby that I was. So this day I woke up and I was in the bathroom and I had my fingers in my mouth like I was pulling a pistol and shooting my brains out. And the thought came to me, call AA. And I have to tell you that it was literally a couple of decades before I remember. I always thought that thought just sort of came to me. I didn't know what AA was about. I hadn't seen a PSA. I don't think anybody had talked to me about AA in a blackout. But of course, if you're in a blackout, how are you going to know? But I remembered when I was back in college, I had an acquaintance that one night we were going to go out and do something, and he said, "No, I can't go out. I have to go to an AA meeting." And that was that little piece of information buried itself in some fragment of my brain cells. And it came forward that day. It said, call AA. And I looked in the phone book and I called New York Intergroup. Thank God for New York Intergroup. And they sent me to a group called the Rutgers Group, which was on West 73rd Street off of Broadway. It doesn't exist anymore. And I walked into the room. The room there is about this size, and it holds about this many people. That's what it was like when I walked in there. It was gigantic. They had cookies and coffee in the back. I did think they were for sale, so I stole them. It was a church, so I had a tie and a jacket on. I hadn't bathed in about 3 weeks, but I thought, oh, it's church. I'm going to put a tie and jacket on and be respectful. And I sat in the back with my cookies and my coffee, and I listened to your stories. Now, Rutgers met on Thursdays and Sundays, and this I guess was a Thursday night. Boy, you told good stories. Your stories were fantastic. I loved your war stories. I had no identification with them, and then this was a beginners meeting. They started talking. They were talking about things like 90 meetings in 90 days, and my life was too rich and full to go to more than one meeting a week. So that was out. But there was something in the room. I was so miserable and so unhappy. But I came back Sunday. And still, I listened to the war stories, and they were tremendous. And I had a routine, a drinking routine, and these were the mechanics. I worked in this French bistro. 9 o'clock was cocktail hour at the bistro for me and the other waiters. I'd set myself up with a large glass of vodka and club soda at the bar, and I would drink that. That was kept full by the bartender. I have coffee in the kitchen, cigarette at the bar, cigarette in the kitchen, and the customers got waited on in between if they were lucky. And then I would go around. I had a home bar, which was called the Copper Hatch, which, like the Rutgers Group, is no longer there. I'd go in there. The bartender would see me coming. He'd put a vodka and club soda, a vodka and club soda, and a vodka and club soda on the bar. 3 right in a row. That's what started me off. I'd drink there till 2 o'clock in the morning. I would help him close out his bar, because by this time he was probably as smashed as I was, and he took 2 of us to sort of add the figures together. And that was good for a lot of free booze. I mean, I have to say, because of my restaurant career, I got a lot of free booze from my cohorts. And then I would go to a place called Don Pepe, which was and I'd switch from vodka to what I call a Spanish gasoline called Cardinal Mendoza. Was what it was, and then I would go to another bar on Broadway and have some beer, and then I'd end up at a place called the Dublin House on West 79th Street. In those days, it was not chic. It got very chic soon after I got sober. And that was a bar that I had sworn I would never go in, because that's where alcoholics drank. And there I was, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I would be drinking shots of Dewar's with short beer backs, with my head on the bar, and just wondering where the hell my life was going. And off I'd go home. And this was my routine. So now I've been introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. About 2 weeks of going to these meetings on Thursdays and Sundays, because I didn't listen very well. I thought this was the only meeting in New York City, that they rotated the meetings, but this was the Thursday night meeting, and then they had a Sunday night meeting. And I just didn't hear. I didn't get a beginner's packet. I didn't get a meeting book. Well, there's a reason for that, which I'll tell you in a second. But I finally, it sort of drilled into me. They're talking about not drinking. I went, okay, I will not drink. And I did not drink like today I diet. I really white-knuckled my not drinking, and I did not drink for 2 weeks. I'd go into my work. I told the boss and I told everybody there that I knew, I'm in AA and I'm not drinking. Of course, the boss was this little Moroccan mafioso guy, and he could care less what I do as long as I show up. And then I would go around to my home bar, and I'd sit at the bar till 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'd regale everybody, I'm in AA and I'm not drinking. And I go down to Don Pepe, I'm in AA and I'm not drinking. And this other bar on Broadway, and I didn't go into the Dublin House. They had old Irish bartenders in there, and I don't think they would be interested in hearing about my being in AA and not drinking. But I would go home so bloated because all I drank was Perrier and club soda. From about 9 o'clock in the evening till 3 or 4 in the morning. And I was a little gaseous, to say the least. And I would go to these meetings, but it just was really hard. I just was, God, I'm not drinking, but my life is absolutely miserable. I was telling everybody in these bars that I was in AA and not drinking. And the people I was not telling that I was in AA were you people in AA. I was not making eye contact. I was not saying hello. I stole my cookies and coffee. I sat in the back with my head down. I listened to you, and as soon as they hit that prayer, and out the door I went. And in those days they didn't hold hands, so I'm getting on, so I can say in those days. And one night, I was the chef of this bistro. We had done some catering thing or something. It was now December, I guess, and we had done some Christmas party or something. And we're sitting at the bar. I'm drinking Perrier, and she's a rather heavy-set woman. And she said, Doug, you are not an alcoholic. You are like me. You are an episodic alcoholic. And that sounded good. And I went behind the bar, and I got some Amaretto di Serrano to celebrate my episode of alcohol. And she went to the bathroom, and she slid off the toilet and got stuck between the toilet and the wall. And that was an episode. I started drinking again. My dear wife, oh my goodness, she was scrambling. I mean, to this day, my daughter, if she gets on the subject, she would get really upset because my wife was going to church rummage sales to get her clothes. We had no money. All of my money, I was making good money. This little French bistro was hopping. I was pulling down in the 70s. I was pulling down well over $100 a night. That was good money in those days. And I was coming home with nothing and lying and all this. My wife was working and she was juggling the children, and it was not a happy scene. And so in those days, and I don't know what happens today, but in those days, some of the restaurants I worked in, people would tip marijuana, joints and packets. I'm not going to get into a drug-a-logs. I don't fear that. Drugs scared the hell out of me. But they tipped this marijuana, and I kept it all in my wallet. I had this bulging wallet filled with little plastic bags and little joints all stuffed in there. And I didn't like, I had inhaled marijuana. And I really didn't like it. I didn't like that little sort of buzz that went on and on and on. And then when you're ready to go to sleep, the buzz is going and going. I just did not like it at all. But my wife decided to go to Toronto for a visit. She had a lot of friends in Toronto. Take the children on a vacation in the summer and go visit. What she was really doing was scouting out a place to live because she'd had it. She had had it. So that week, while she was gone, I was going to have a blast. Oh, my goodness. I was going to have one big party and do everything I fantasized about doing and drink myself silly. But I thought, to celebrate, I'll smoke this marijuana. So I made a marijuana cigar. And I smoked it. I was in bed for 3 days. I was so sick. I was getting out of bed, I was going outside, and I was literally walking along the side of the walls. I was so paranoid to go get a sandwich. It was horrible. It was the horrors. The wife came back. I don't know. My instincts were pretty crummy. I think I saw the writing on the wall with her, but I was getting it's humiliating to have your wife treat you in the same manner as your 5-year-old. And I tell this little story. It has a curse in it, so forgive me, but I like the story. It was told to me by this past delegate from Oklahoma, and he and his wife had been married for 25 years, and he had been sober 15 of those 25 years, and she threw an anniversary party for them for their 25th wedding anniversary, and she gave them this exquisite watch, beautiful watch, and on the back of it, it said, "Thank you for 10 good years and 15 wonderful years." And he looked at the watch and he looked at her, and he said, "Were those first 10 years really good?" And she said, "No, but the jeweler wouldn't engrave shitty on the back of the watch." That was my marriage. I'm in this bistro. The owner, the little Moroccan mafioso, has changed us from wearing aprons, these sort of bib aprons. He's put us into double-breasted white blazers. It's a little restaurant. It's 60 seats. It's small, low ceiling, very French. And into this room, into the restaurant, walks this woman with another woman. And I look at her and I say, I know this woman from someplace, and I can't place her. And I'm like, where do I know her from? She sits down, and I'm looking at her, and she's a kind of a tough cookie. And I say, I know you from someplace. From Rutgers? Oh, yes. She was the dragon lady that ran the beginners meeting. She would sit next to the speaker, and she'd make editorial visual comments on everything that was said. Ooh, ah. And I said, She said, are you still drinking? And I was into my second bowl of vodka at the bar, and I said, yes. And then she looked at me, and she said very gently to me, she looked me right in the eye, and she said, no one comes to AA by mistake. That took my breath away. I was breathless. I was speechless. It was like, oh my God. What she gave me in that little phrase was hope. I had gone to AA and I thought it didn't work. And here she was saying, you didn't make a mistake. Come back. She's telling me to come back, in essence. But this was Thursday night. And it was the only meeting in New York. And so I couldn't go till Sunday. So I drank Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. And I have to tell you, I was in my home bar on Saturday night. That was July 21st, 1979. And I was drinking a beer. And I was drinking a bottle of beer. I was drinking out of the bottle. I know it's déclassé, but I was drinking out of the bottle. And I put the beer down. That was my last drink. I put the beer down, and in 1 second of putting that beer down, my entire life changed. My entire life just completely turned around. And I didn't know it. I had no idea that would happen to me. I just knew I was going to go to this AA meeting, and I was going to go back, and I was hopeful. I had hope. I had hope for the first time in my long, well, it wasn't that long. I was youngish then. I was 33, 34. I had some hope. And I went back into this meeting. I walked into this gigantic room that seats about 1 million people. And I went early, and she was there early, and she saw me come in, and she literally bent over laughing when she saw me come down the aisle. She grabbed me, and she started to introduce me. That room seats 80. I thought the stage was like 10 feet high at 6 inches off the ground. And she introduced me, and I started my process in AA. I was going to, get a sponsor. That's what they said, get a sponsor. So I started interviewing sponsors. I was sensitive, I was deep, I was precious. I needed Sigmund Freud, or I needed Carl Jung, somebody who, could really be of benefit to me. And there was another one of these women in AA walking down the street with me, little Marge. And she was walking with some scruffy character next to her. She said, "Doug, do you have a sponsor yet?" She knew I didn't. They talk that way to you, too. "Do you have a sponsor yet?" And I said, "No." She said, "Bill, can you sponsor Doug?" "Oh, sure." "This is your sponsor." He worked in a luncheonette as a cook. And God bless him, he immersed me in Alcoholics Anonymous. He babysat me that entire summer. Frank M. used to say that the summertime is the best time to come into AA because you stick to the seats. With Billy, he also stick to car hoods because he used to put me up on them and start feeding me AA. He would talk to me, AA. He led me to the literature. He referred me to the steps. He talked about his experience and what he did and the challenges that he met. And he talked to me about early sobriety and the things that I should do. I was scared to death. I was working in a bar. I was handling martinis now, straight up martinis. They spill on your fingers when you pick them up to put them on a table. I wanted to lick my fingers every time I served one. I'm running into the bathroom to wash my hands 10, 15 times a night. And he was just telling me to be easy does it, to call people. To this day, he told me to get phone numbers. And I have a little book, and it is filled with phone numbers. And there are people in this room, I have their phone numbers. And if I'm in trouble, I can call them, just as they call me. And that was important to me. Postponing the drink, oh my goodness. I used to stand in that bar and I would watch the minute hand go by just to think about not drinking for that minute. And it worked. The phone calls, they had a public phone. We didn't have a lot of voice mail in those days, so I'd make 4 or 5 phone calls. Nobody was home. But the moment passed. That postponing the drink was amazing. I won't drink tonight. I won't drink now. I won't drink in the next minute. I tell myself, I'll drink tomorrow. Okay, I'll drink tomorrow. I can deal with that. And tomorrow would come and say, I'll wait. And I did have the compulsion to drink lifted fairly shortly into the program. But I did not come into AA singing Volare. A lot of baggage came with me. I was not a well person. And I began the process of working the steps slowly, sometimes well, sometimes not so consistently. But I went to a lot of meetings. I talked to a lot of people. I stayed close to Alcoholics Anonymous. And they began, the essence of the steps had already begun to take hold of me without my doing a heck of a lot. But once I started to do that work, they began to work on me and through me. We had somebody at the office at the AA meeting speak a while ago, and he had gone up to an old-timer when he had a few days, and he said, "When should I start working the steps?" And the old-timer said to him, "When do you want to get well?" And I thought that was ideal. And I began to get well, sort of. Still had a lot of trouble. By my 9th year, I was doing a lot of. Within the first 5 years, first 5 years, I wanted sponsees. I had to have sponsees. Oh, I got to get sponsees. Like a notch on my gun. I have to have sponsees. I couldn't get arrested, you know. But it happened. Eventually, it happened. I was making coffee at a meeting. I walked in to make the coffee, and there in this sort of ill-lit room stood this little young schlump of a guy, and he says, "My name is David, and I'm in AA a week." And I said, "Come help me make coffee." And we started to make coffee, and there was something that happened that there was nothing I could say that was wrong. It just seemed to sort of funnel through me, that everything he asked, everything I said, I had it. I had something to give away to somebody after that time I've spent immersing myself in Alcoholics Anonymous. Some people get it sooner, but I was so blessed by that. It was a turning point in my sobriety, because I've over the years worked. I have a lot of sponsees. I work with a lot of men, and man, do they help me more than I help them, I'm sure. So over the years, the steps have become kind of the inner architecture of my life, just as the traditions do. Concepts, not so much, but the steps and the traditions are work pretty much through me. But I was saying 9 years. I was going to do steps. I was going to go to meetings. I was going to work with sponsees. I was going to work with a sponsor. But that's all. But I had a lot of other problems. And I went screaming into therapy at 9 years sober. And I worked with that fellow for about 3 years. And again, that was a turning point in my life. I needed additional help. So I am going to move ahead. My AA life went very well, for the most part. About 21 years ago, I had gotten a little nomadic with my meetings, and I had a sponsor who said, "You need to get a home group." So I picked the Oxford group. The Oxford group in Manhattan is my home group. It's a group that I think is now 55 years old, something like that. And it was named not after the Oxford group, the illustrious Oxford group. It was named after a Fleabag single-room occupancy hotel on the Upper West Side called the Oxford Hotel. Let's see those old-timers going, ha, 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 ha. We'll name it this. Today, if they sent that in on a new group form, boy, we would take umbrage with that name. So anyway, my sobriety, like, you get old if you don't, and you live and you don't drink. I came in sort of 34-ish, youngish, and now Social Security is looming. So it's been quite a trip. I'm vamping for time. I'm trying to segue into my experience with GSO, and I'm not doing it very gracefully, but I'm going to get there somehow, if it's a little rough. My home group, they had a gentleman named Frank M. that I've mentioned. He was the archivist at the General Service Office, and he spent an awful lot of time in Florida, and I hadn't seen him in a while, and so he came back from Florida. And I said, "Frank, how you doing?" And he looked at me, and he said, 4 people are retiring from the General Service Office. Why don't you write a letter? And he walked away. That's Frank. He always liked the spotlight. So, Somebody's telling me to wrap it up? No. So I wrote this letter to the General Service Office, and I waited, and I got a call. And they said, come on up, and we're going to interview you. Well, the interview process at the General Service Office is rather onerous. You interview the general manager. You interview, at the time, was the senior advisor to the general manager. You interview the HR. And you interview with all, at that time, 11 GSO staff members. And then you go and tell your story to them, which is, I know you're not doing it, but I'd never had my story judged before that I was aware of. And it was done on a Friday meeting. It was done at the 11 o'clock meeting. And so there were other people there who really didn't know really what was happening, that this was part of the interview process. So I'm there modestly telling them that I have 17 years of sobriety. Modestly 3 or 4 times telling them that I have 17 years of sobriety. And this old-timer there said, I went up to an old-timer down in Louisiana and told him that I had 19 years of sobriety. And the old-timer looked at me and said, son, that's a good start. So that was what he conveyed to me. It's a good start. And I got the job. And I have to tell you that to this day I pinch myself that I have this job. I work with wonderful people. It's a great staff. It's a great place to work for. I get to work for you. I get to help you do what you need to do, not only in service, but to carry the message to the alcoholic. And I can't think of anything else that I'd rather do than work for you. Really, is what I do. And I saw Rick in the hallway before this started. He says, don't screw this up for us, Doug. So I'm hoping I don't. But the office has been a whole different world for me. I was used to slinging hash in these squat and gobble places. And now I'm working in an office, a corporate office. My hours are morning until afternoon rather than late afternoon till early morning, and my whole life changed. And I went on corrections, and Mr. Terry, who has gone to hospitality, he was the first person I encountered. I went to the Corrections Connection in HMB, and Terry was my host there. He was the corrections chair for Sini, and he was so warm and loving, and I was a nervous wreck. Because that was my first AA event, and it was very exciting. I had to do a video. Sarah P. was the outgoing staff member that I replaced, and she was on corrections, and I only got to work with her a week. And about the end of the week, she said, "Oh, by the way, you have to do a video." I went, "Oh, a video." Okay, so I got the privilege to work on It Sure Beats, carrying the message behind these walls. That was so exciting. We went all over the country to prisons. We're down in Texas at a private prison, and the fellow there that was the warden, he didn't make it into the movie, but he was commenting, and he said, "A prison without an AA meeting is like a dog without a tail." And everywhere we went, these prisons that we went, they opened their arms to Alcoholics Anonymous and its members to come in there. I was on literature with the 4th edition Big Book. I read 925 of the 1,200 stories that came in. That was exciting. And then we got it down to 95, and I rotated. I didn't get to finish it, but it came out really well, I think. And then I was on the international assignment, and that was fantastic. What an experience. I went to 23 countries in 2 years. I had all kinds of wonderful experiences. To go to a meeting every year in Mongolia, they have a convention, which is also their conference. And you go there, and when we were there were Russians there, there were Japanese there there were Koreans there, and they all had interpreters. And you sit in this yurt, this large tent that was the meeting place, and this buzz of translations is going on. It's really quite incredible. If you ever get the bucks together and want to go on an adventure, go to the Mongolian convention. I'm sure that's exactly what you want to do. But it was fun. And then we went from the Mongolia, we took a bus ride, a 27-hour bus ride into Siberia. And there were, when we went there were 3 intergroups set up, 24 groups in an area bigger than the United States. And they were so excited. These Russians were just so excited about carrying the message of AA. And talk about challenges. Oh, my goodness, but they were doing it. And they had all kinds of questions, and it was at the time, the general manager of the Moscow GSO took the Siberian Express. He sat up on that for 4 days to come out and join us. And so it was marvelous. Then we went to a place called the Federation of Tuva. Who knows where the Federation of Tuva is? There we go. The Federation of Tuva is next to Mongolia, which is north of China. And the Federation of Tuva had been a part of the Soviet Union, but it was a nomadic society similar to the Mongolian society. And we met with the Minister of Health. They had AA a few years before, but it had gotten lost, and we were there to help see if we could get it started again. And I think it's sort of bumbling along there. But we were talking to the Minister of Health, and he said something very interesting. He said the Tuvan society was very similar to the Native American society with their DNA. They had a terrible time metabolizing alcohol. And before the Soviets came in, it was a nomadic group, and there was a taboo against adults drinking alcohol until they were 35 years old. You could not drink alcohol until you were 35. Of course, you were nearly dead by then. But you had really done you had accomplished, it was kind of, you were useful enough. By 35, they figure you could handle it. And then the Soviets came in, and that just blew that taboo away. And they had a terrible alcohol problem in the Federation of Tuva. So we started a little meeting in a center there. Interestingly enough, it was mostly Russians, not too many Tuvans. But I think it's still sputtering along. And what's happened is that the Russians in Siberia have come to the aid of the Tuvans. So they've taken over the sponsorship of the Tuvans. So country-to-country sponsorship is really invaluable. I traveled by car a 7-hour trip from Croatia over the mountains into Bosnia-Herzegovina. Bosnia-Herzegovina had a few pockets of expat meetings, 2 or 3 people, but there was nothing. There was no quote-unquote local AA meeting there. And we met with some of the expats, and they started a local meeting. They got some people, and they started a local meeting. In the former Yugoslavia, they had clubs. As you may be aware, in communist countries, they were atheistic regimes, and so the whole concept of God was forbidden politically. So a psychiatrist had set up these clubs for recovery, taking the 12 steps, reducing them, eliminating any spiritual aspect to them, and combining them with aspects of Al-Anon as well as AA. And these clubs had been very big in Yugoslavia. There were close to 800 of them, but when the Yugoslavian regime fell and the various countries broke up, the clubs declined in numbers. But we did visit one in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and there was this psychiatrist there, this woman. She was ancient. She was well into her 80s. And she had set up an alcohol unit in the hospital prior to the Bosnian War. And it was very successful. And she was diverting a lot of these people into these clubs, and she was helping people get sober. And then Sarajevo was occupied by the Serbs, and they were all arrested, and they were in the hospital. And she talked her way out. She got all the doctors out of the hospital, and the Serbs blew the hospital up. They sent all the patients home, and she spent the war going around the hills. It's a big valley in Sarajevo, and she went from hill to hill to hill, looking for her patients to see if she could help them. Many of them were shot. Many of them were dead. But after the war, she was able, with little money, to reestablish her clinic. And she was magnificent. And these people shared from the heart. It was really beautiful to listen to them share. And they were sharing just like we would share at an AA meeting. It was exquisite. And at the end of the meeting, I said, you're speaking the language of the heart. And this woman said to me, here we speak no other. I was like, oh, my God. And just, that's been my experience with the international assignment. Now, we have a new general manager, a newish general manager. Not so new general manager. And last summer she had approached me about taking on a management position, which I hadn't really considered, but she's persuasive. And so I got booted further down the service structure from staff member to management. And so I'm now at the GSO, I'm a Director of Staff Services, which is an interesting position. It's multitasking to the nth degree. And it's very exciting. And I really enjoy it. I supervise my former colleagues. They are my colleagues, but my colleagues, I supervise the 10 alcoholic staff. And because we went from 11 to 10, the workload got a little heavy. So we are now looking for an additional staff person. Your delegates have been sent application forms and a cover letter describing what we need. So please get in touch with your delegate if you are interested. Good communication skills are required, good organizational skills, the ability to work independently on the one hand, but to work as a team on the other. And 6 years minimum sobriety is required for the job. And some computer skills would be good. Actually, very good. And please, consider it. You would have to relocate to the center of the universe. I mean, New York City. So keep that in mind. File that away if you're interested. And if you have, and here's where I love being Director of Staff Services, because I can delegate things. If you have questions, Rick W. is available to answer them. Rick is the staff coordinator, and he and I are the point people on this in this endeavor. So I think I'm running out of steam and out of things to say. I often, it's challenging for me to just I'm trying to say that I thank you for my sobriety. It's because of you that I'm standing here. It's because I came in this shattered human being, and you living in chaos, which is exactly where I was in my head and in my life. And you gave me a set of tools to use. You gave me a recipe book that said, here are the basic ingredients to putting a good life together. And I listened to your stories. I listened to how you succeeded. I listened to how you failed, how you lived, how you went through sickness, how you had money come into your life, how you had to go out of your life, relationships. And I was like a sponge. I just took it all in. And it's changed my life. I have a second life. I really do, because of you people and what you do and your service and your being here. A friend of mine was saying to me earlier, he says he was at NERAASA for the first time. He said, I feel so overwhelmed. And I said, yes, because you're part of a larger pack now. And I really feel that we are a pack in the best term, and I mean that in the best terminology of how we work together. So I'm very grateful to be sober. I'm very grateful that you're sober and here today. I hope that the people that are new, that are here, stay sober a day at a time. It's really just a day at a time, showing up, contacting, stay in contact with the people here. We don't do this alone. I don't do this alone. It is we, always we. And I'm blessed, and I bless you. Thank you.
I gave him my best shot.